You're humiliating yourself.
No, I'm reclaiming what you humiliated.
What happens when a harmless dare turns into the moment that ends an engagement? Why did my fiancé stay silent while everyone laughed, only to later answer me with paperwork instead of words? Can I still call him controlling when the consequences arrive in public and everyone sees what I did? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Eva Keene, and if you'd told me one stupid party game would end my engagement, I would have laughed. It was supposed to be a fun night, harmless, a few drinks and dares with friends. I didn't think sitting on a guy's lap for 10 seconds could ruin my life. Everyone laughed, phones out, music blasting. I remember glancing at Liam, my fiancé, expecting him to roll his eyes and smile like he always did. But he didn't. He just stared. No words, no expression, just that calm, quiet look that somehow cut through all the noise. I told myself he was being dramatic, that he'd get over it. I even joked later that if he couldn't handle a game, maybe he wasn't ready for marriage. But then the silence started. His, not mine. The separate mugs, the locked drawers, the calendar alerts on his phone. At first, I thought he was sulking. I didn't realize he was documenting. Now, every laugh from that night echoes like a warning I ignored. Everyone said I was overreacting to his distance. Turns out I wasn't reacting enough. Because when the papers came, they didn't just end the engagement, they ended the version of me that thought she was untouchable. If there's one thing I've always been told, it's that I know how to light up a room. I don't mean that in a braggy way, it's just what people say. I'm the kind of person who starts games when things get dull, who orders another round when everyone's debating whether to call it a night. It's what makes me, me. At least, that's what I used to believe before. That one night turned into a slow-motion car crash I couldn't stop. It was Clara's idea, of course. She'd been planning this rooftop party for weeks, a sort of pre-wedding get-together before Liam and I sent out our final invites. Just our usual circle, a mix of my co-workers, some of Liam's friends from college, and a few people who'd somehow become part of our social routine. Music, cocktails, fairy lights, the works. It was one of those early summer nights that feels like it could last forever. Warm air, everyone glowing a little from the drinks and the city lights. I remember thinking it was perfect. Too perfect, maybe, because perfect nights never stay that way. Liam isn't really a party person. He's quiet, grounded, the kind of man who's most comfortable talking one-on-one about things that actually matter. But he comes to these things for me, always has. He even helped carry the ice buckets up to the rooftop that afternoon, still in his work shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair damp from his shower. I kissed him on the cheek, told him he looked handsome, and he smiled in that soft, distracted way he always does when he's thinking about logistics instead of people. I didn't see the flicker of worry in his eyes. I didn't see much of anything that night except the attention I was getting. By the time the dare game started, everyone was loose, loud, a little too happy. Clara had this idea. Let's play the grown-up version of Truth or Dare, she said, waving a half-empty bottle like a flag. I rolled my eyes but sat down anyway. I didn't want to be the buzzkill. Liam was leaning against the balcony rail, talking quietly with one of his friends, probably about football or something just as thrilling. I figured he could use a reminder that I was fun, that people liked me, that he was lucky. That's what I told myself later anyway. The dares started harmless. Take a shot of hot sauce. Call your ex and sing to their voicemail. Silly, reckless, the kind of thing everyone would forget by morning. Then Connor, tall, tanned, one of those guys who always flirts just enough to make it feel like a joke, dared Clara to dance on a chair. She did. Everyone cheered, and I clapped like she'd just won a trophy. When it was my turn, Clara grinned. eyes sparkling with that same mix of alcohol and mischief that always means trouble. "Eva," she said, "I dare you to sit on Connor's lap for 30 seconds. The crowd hooted and laughed, and I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? Say no and look boring. I glanced at Connor, who raised his eyebrows, playing along. It was harmless, right? Liam knew Connor. We'd all hung out before. Nothing serious, just teasing. I looked over at Liam then, expecting him to roll his eyes, maybe chuckle at how ridiculous it was. Instead, he was watching me. Not angry, just still, like he'd turned into stone. Someone counted down, 3, 2, 1, and before I could think too hard about it, I walked over and perched on Connor's lap. The whole table erupted in laughter and cheers. Someone shouted, "She's got no fear." And I did this exaggerated pose, hand on my hip, pretending to blow a kiss. Connor laughed, keeping his hands clearly in the air, not touching me at all, which somehow made it worse, because it made me look like the one in charge of the humiliation. 30 seconds isn't long, but in that moment, it felt like a lifetime. The laughter got louder, the music thumped, my heart raced, and somewhere behind it all, I could feel Liam's eyes burning holes through me. When Clara shouted, "Time!" I jumped up and curtsied dramatically, like it was all a joke. The room, the rooftop, exploded in applause. I turned to look at Liam again, ready to laugh it off, but he wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe he'd gone to the bathroom. Then I saw the empty glass where he'd been standing, the way his jacket was gone from the back of the chair. I texted him, "Where'd you go?" No response. I sent another. "It was just a dare, babe. Don't be weird." Still nothing. I told Clara he must have gone to grab something from the car, tried to sound casual, but inside my stomach was tightening. When I finally found him downstairs, he was waiting by the elevator, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. He didn't look angry, just quiet. Too quiet. I started to talk before he could. "Hey, come on, it was a joke. Everyone was laughing." He looked at me then, and his voice was calm when he said, "You enjoy that kind of attention more than respect, don't you?" It stung because it was too calm. No raised voice, no scene, just this cold clarity that made me defensive. I told him he was overreacting, that it was a silly party game, that he should learn to lighten up. He nodded slowly, like he was filing the words away somewhere private. Then he said, "We'll talk later," and walked out into the night. I didn't chase him. I told myself he needed space. In truth, I didn't want to be the girl who begs. I went back upstairs, told everyone he'd just had too much to drink, and pretended everything was fine. Clara rolled her eyes and handed me another drink. "He'll get over it," she said. "He's lucky you're even this fun." I laughed too loud and took a sip. Somewhere in the background, I saw a phone light flash. Someone had caught it on video. The dare, the laughter, my stupid pose, it was already being shared. I brushed it off, told myself I looked great. By morning, the clip was all over our group chat, dozens of laughing emojis, captions like, "Eva wins the night," and "Poor Liam, hope he's secure." I typed LOL stop, but secretly, I liked that people were talking about me. When I finally looked over, Liam wasn't in bed. His side was perfectly smooth, the sheets cold. On the counter in the kitchen sat 2 mugs, his empty, washed, mine still half full from the night before. I texted him again. "Can we talk?" He replied almost instantly, "Busy today." The silence after that felt heavier than any fight we'd ever had. I kept telling myself it would blow over. Men get dramatic sometimes. They sulk, they cool off, they come back. I even joked to Clara that I'd give him a few days and he'd be begging me to forget about it. But when he came home that evening, he didn't bring flowers or an apology. He didn't bring anything except himself, calm and quiet. He took off his shoes, lined them neatly by the door, and went straight to the kitchen. I tried to lighten the mood, told him I'd made pasta, his favourite, And he just nodded. I poured him a glass of wine. He thanked me, no smile, no small talk, just polite distance. I asked if he was still mad. He said, "I'm not mad." "So what then?" "I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About patterns." I laughed, though it came out too sharp. "You're making it sound like I've done something awful." "It was a game, Liam." He didn't answer, just rinsed his plate and set it in the dishwasher. That silence again. I tried to get his attention by brushing against him when I passed, by making small jokes, but he didn't bite. He kissed my forehead before bed and said, "We'll talk when you're ready to listen." Then he turned off the light and faced away from me. I couldn't sleep. Every little sound felt too loud. The hum of the fridge, the clock ticking, my own heartbeat. I checked my phone again. The video had been reshared twice by mutual friends. Someone tagged me in it with the caption, "The fearless bride-to-be." I should have deleted it, but instead, I commented with a laughing emoji. When Liam left for work the next morning, I noticed his phone buzz on the counter. A calendar alert popped up, downtown 10:15 a.m. I almost called out to ask what it was, but something stopped me. He never wrote down times like that before. It was too precise, too deliberate. I told myself it was work-related and went back to scrolling. Later that afternoon, Clara sent me screenshots from someone's story. The caption read, "Party queen caught red-handed," followed by laughing emojis. The clip had nearly 10,000 views. I texted her, "Take it down," but she said, "Relax, it's hilarious." I told Liam when he got home, trying to make it sound like gossip. "Can you believe people are this bored?" He looked up from his laptop. "Do you want it taken down?" "I mean, it's not that serious." He nodded again, that same quiet nod that was starting to scare me more than yelling ever could. That night, while brushing my teeth, I heard something faint from the living room. A low hum, like a printer starting up. I peeked around the corner and saw the glow from his laptop. He was standing there, focused, printing something. When I asked what it was, he said, "Just some things I needed to organize." "What kind of things?" "Personal ones." I told him he was acting secretive. He said, "You call everything secretive when it isn't about you." That hit me like a slap. I turned off the bathroom light and went to bed without saying goodnight. In the morning, he was gone again. This time, there was a faint smell of toner in the air and a single sticky note on the counter that said, "Breakfast in the fridge." I wanted to crumple it, but didn't. It was too neat, too deliberate, just like everything he'd started doing. By noon, my phone buzzed non-stop. Texts from friends laughing about the video, a message from my manager asking if I was okay, even one from my mother saying she saw the clip. She wrote, "You looked confident. Don't let him shame you for being lively." I wanted to believe her. I told myself everyone was overreacting. But when I got home that night, the apartment felt different, colder somehow. Liam was sitting at the dining table, laptop open, expression unreadable. I asked how his day was. He said fine. Then he looked at me and said, "I've been thinking a lot about what kind of life we're building." I tried to joke. "Hopefully one where you don't freak out every time I have fun." He didn't even flinch. "Fun isn't the problem," he said. "Patterns are." I didn't know what that meant then. I just knew the quiet between us was starting to feel like a wall I couldn't see over. And somewhere deep down, even as I told myself it was nothing, I could feel it, the shape of something gathering behind that silence, something patient, sharp, and waiting. The morning after the party had this eerie quiet, the kind that makes you aware of every tiny sound. The clock ticked too loud. The fridge hummed like it was whispering. Liam's side of the bed was still perfectly flat, the sheets stretched tight. I stared at that untouched space and told myself he'd just gone for a run, that maybe he was still cooling off. He wasn't the type to hold grudges. He was calm, logical. I used to think that made him safe. When I went into the kitchen, 2 mugs sat on the counter again, his rinsed and placed, neatly upside down, mine from the night before, stained with old coffee. That had become our new language. Silent dish placement. I made another cup and scrolled through my phone. Notifications were exploding. The rooftop video was everywhere. Someone had posted it to a local event page with the caption, "When the bride-to-be forgets who she's marrying." The comments made my chest tighten. Some people laughed, others wrote things like, "If my fiancé did this, the wedding would be off." I wanted to text Liam to warn him, to say something before he saw it, but when I opened our chat, I saw the last thing he'd written. "Busy today." I started typing, "Can we please talk?" Then deleted it. If I reached out, it would look like I was guilty. I wasn't guilty. It was a game. People were ridiculous. At work, it was worse. My coworker Melissa stopped by my desk with that fake sympathy smile. "Rough night?" she said, dropping her coffee stirrer into her cup. I laughed it off. "Just a silly dare," I said. She tilted her head. "It's all over my feed. You really went for it." I said something like, "What, I'm not allowed to have fun?" She mumbled, "Sure, just brave with your fiancé watching." She walked away before I could answer. The HR director, of all people, came by later. She asked if everything was okay at home. I wanted to ask what business it was of hers, but I just smiled and said, "Everything's fine." She said something about maintaining a professional image online. I nodded like I cared. Inside, I was seething. It wasn't my fault people were obsessed with drama. By lunch, Clara had texted, "Don't look at the comments. It's not that bad." Which obviously meant it was that bad. I clicked the post anyway. One comment read, "Imagine marrying someone who treats humiliation like a hobby." Another, "She's not ready for commitment." I actually laughed out loud because the alternative was crying. When I got home that evening, the apartment smelled faintly of detergent. Liam was standing by the sink, washing a plate that was already clean. I said, "You saw it, didn't you?" He didn't turn around. What would I have seen? I told him not to play dumb. He dried the plate slowly, folded the towel and said, "You mean the video everyone's tagging me in?" His voice was level, almost polite. I said, "People are making a big deal out of nothing." He nodded once. They usually do when they're watching something real. That made me snap. So now it's real. It was 30 seconds on a dare. I slammed my bag on the counter. He looked at me, steady, unblinking. "It's not the seconds," he said. "It's the intention." I said he was overanalyzing. He said, "That's what people call it when they don't want to listen." I threw my hands up, muttering that I couldn't deal with this. He said, "You don't have to. I'm already dealing with it." Then he walked into the bedroom and shut the door quietly, the click softer than a sigh. The next morning, his laptop was open on the table. I don't know what came over me, but I leaned closer. There was a spreadsheet, columns labeled dates, events, notes. I scrolled down. The last entry said, June 12th, rooftop, witnesses, multiple. My stomach dropped. Before I could look more, the screen went dark. I heard the shower turn off. I walked away like nothing happened. He came out in a towel, calm as ever, said good morning, like we were strangers at a hotel breakfast. I watched him pick up his phone. It buzzed with a notification, downtown 10:15 a.m. I asked, "What's that?" He said, "Errands." I laughed. "Since when do you time errands?" He smiled faintly, not at me, but at the window. "Since some things need records." I didn't ask what that meant. At work, the whispers were relentless. Someone had printed a still image of the dare, me laughing, Connor grinning, hands raised, and taped it on the break room fridge. I tore it down, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen. Melissa said the boss was talking about reputation management. At lunch, Clara called. "You're trending in the local group," she said, half laughing. "You should lean into it, make it content." I wanted to scream. Clara, this is my relationship, she said, then control the narrative. So I did. That night, I posted a photo of Liam and me from a vacation last year, captioned, "A little humor never hurt anyone." I tagged him. Within minutes, comments rolled in, half supportive, half pitying. Liam didn't like or comment, he didn't even acknowledge it. When he got home, he looked at me, then at his phone. "Trying to rewrite things?" he asked. I said, "I'm just reminding people who we are." He said, "They already know who you are." His tone wasn't cruel, just final. Later, when he went to bed, I stayed up scrolling. The new post had hundreds of likes. I told myself that meant I'd won. But then I noticed something else. The original video was gone from the event page, deleted. The caption replaced with a note that said, "Removed per request." I walked into the bedroom. "Did you get the video taken down?" He didn't open his eyes. "It was public defamation," he said. "I requested removal." I laughed. "Defamation? It's my image." He opened his eyes then, calm as ever. "It's both of ours." He rolled over, and I stood there in the doorway feeling small for the first time in a long time. 2 days later, I came home early from work. His car was already in the garage, which was odd. Inside, the printer was running again. I peeked around the corner. Paper after paper slid out, stacked neatly. He was labeling folders, utilities, bank, shared assets. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Sorting." "Sorting what?" "Information." "About what?" "Us." I tried to laugh it off. "You're acting like you're building a case." He didn't even glance up. "Maybe I am." That made me flinch. "You're seriously documenting a game?" He said, "No, I'm documenting a pattern." His voice was so calm it scared me more than if he'd shouted. I told him he was paranoid. He said, "Maybe, but paranoia keeps things safe." Then he slid the papers into a drawer and locked it. The sound of the click echoed through the whole apartment. That night I went to Clara's. She poured wine, rolled her eyes, said, "He's trying to control you. Classic guilt move." She told me to post something light-hearted to show I wasn't hiding. So I did. A story of us laughing at a restaurant months ago. Caption, "We fight, we love, we live." I tagged him again. He didn't reply. Instead, he turned off his social media entirely. The next morning, my mother called. "I saw your pictures," she said. "He's overreacting, sweetheart. Men don't like confident women. Don't let him punish you for being seen." I said she was right. That word, seen, stuck with me all day. When I got home that evening, the lights were off. Only the faint glow of his laptop illuminated the living room. He was on a video call. I froze in the hallway. I heard him say, "Yes, I have the timestamps. I'll bring the files in person." My heart hammered. I waited until he hung up. He looked up and smiled faintly. "You're home early?" I asked. "Who are you talking to?" "Just a follow-up," he said. "With who?" "Someone who handles things properly." I didn't ask more. That night he slept in the guest room. I heard the soft whir of his phone vibrating, a notification ping, the sound of him moving quietly, almost rhythmically. When I opened his laptop the next morning, yes, I did it, I found another new folder on the desktop, Archive A. Inside were screenshots, messages, photos, even comments from the party post. My stomach turned. I closed the lid fast, hands shaking. He walked in a second later, holding 2 mugs. He set one in front of me. "Don't worry," he said. "I back everything up. Nothing gets lost." I tried to act like I hadn't seen. I said, "You're making me sound like a criminal." He said, "Criminals panic. You justify." That line stuck in my head the whole day. At work, Melissa cornered me again. "So, when's the wedding?" she asked, fake sweet. I told her to mind her business. She smirked. "If it's still on." I wanted to slap her. Instead, I walked out and sat in my car, staring at my reflection in the window. I didn't look guilty. I looked tired. I texted Liam. We need to talk tonight. Seriously, he replied. We will. When I got home, he was at the table again, typing something. He didn't look up when I said, "This has gone too far." He said, "Maybe. Or maybe it's the first time it's gone far enough." I demanded to know what he was planning. He said, "You'll find out soon." I asked if he still loved me. He hesitated, then said, "I respect evidence more than words right now." That cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I shouted that he was trying to make me look like the bad guy. He said, "You're doing that on your own." For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then he stood, took his mug, rinsed it, and walked to the guest room. When the door clicked shut, the apartment went dead quiet again. I sat at the table, the glow from his locked laptop reflecting on the window, and for the first time, I felt a tiny edge of fear, not of what he might do, but of what he already had. Still, I told myself I'd fix it. I always did. He'd calm down. He loved me. People forget. The internet moves on. That's what I kept repeating until the morning his calendar reminder went off again. Another one, this time labeled Paper Drop, 11:45. I stared at the screen, the soft chime echoing through the empty kitchen, and realized I had no idea where he was going or what he was planning to drop. The next morning started too quiet again. It was becoming normal. This kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, just empty. Liam had already left by the time I woke up, which wasn't unusual anymore, but something about the way the air felt made me pause. Cold coffee in the pot, 2 mugs, one upside down. It was like he was speaking in patterns only he understood. I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone, trying to drown out the guilt. Or maybe it wasn't guilt, maybe it was just irritation. People were still talking about the party. Someone on a gossip forum had started a thread titled, "Would you marry this woman?" and used my picture from the rooftop. I told myself that it was just jealous people looking for drama. But the comments burned anyway. I wanted to send the link to Clara, tell her she'd started this whole mess. But I didn't. I just deleted it and pretended it didn't exist. At work, I could feel eyes on me. Melissa and 2 others were whispering by the copy machine. Every time I looked up, they stopped. I caught the word fiancé once. I smiled at them anyway, too brightly, the kind of smile that says, "I don't care, even when you do." Around lunchtime, I went outside for air. The city noise felt good, almost comforting. I was scrolling again when a notification popped up from Liam's shared calendar. It was visible to me because we'd linked accounts when planning the wedding. Meeting personal, it said, 11:45 a.m. downtown. Again. That word personal looked strange on his schedule. He never wrote it that way before. I took a screenshot, sent it to Clara, and typed, "He's acting like I cheated or something." She wrote back, "He's probably talking to a therapist or a lawyer, babe. Maybe don't freak him out more." The word lawyer made my stomach twist, but I laughed it off in the office group chat when someone joked about corporate scandals. I wasn't about to be the woman everyone pitied. I told myself that Liam was just making a point, showing me how serious he could be. Men love their silent punishments. That evening, when he came home, he was early. I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch something on Netflix. He took off his shoes and sat across from me, not next to me. "We should talk," he said. "Finally," I said, pretending relief. "You've been acting like a ghost." He leaned back, hands folded. "I'm trying to understand what I'm still doing here." That hit harder than I expected. "You're here because we're engaged," I said, my voice cracking a little. He nodded. "That's one reason, but engagement is supposed to mean a plan for a marriage, not a performance." "Oh, here we go," I said, rolling my eyes. "You think everything I do is performance." "Not everything," he said quietly, "just most of it." I wanted him to yell, to argue, to show something. Instead, he sat there like a wall. I started pacing. "You don't get it, Liam. People laugh, people move on. Nobody's even talking about it anymore." He said, "They are. I froze. How do you know? He picked up his phone and held it out. There were screenshots, comments, reposts, tagged stories. My name, my picture, my laugh frozen mid-air. My stomach dropped. You saved these? I asked. He said, I didn't have to. They're public. I grabbed the phone, scrolling faster. This is insane. You're stalking me. I'm documenting, he said. The word made me want to scream. Documenting what? That I sat down for 30 seconds at a party? He didn't answer. He just turned back toward the kitchen, like the conversation was over. Later, I tried to apologize. Not for the party, but for the fight. I made dinner, lit candles, poured wine. He thanked me, like a guest. I said, can we just hit reset? He took a slow sip and said, I'm resetting already. I asked what that meant, but he didn't answer. He just rinsed his glass and went to the guest room. That's when I noticed the faint smell of printer toner again. The next day, I decided to reclaim my image. I took a selfie at my desk, bright smile, captioned, living, learning, moving on. I tagged no one, but within minutes Clara liked it. Then my mother commented, that's my girl. It felt like a small win, until an anonymous account replied under her comment, he's moving on too. I deleted the comment, but the words stuck in my head all afternoon. When I got home, the apartment lights were dim. Liam was sitting at the table, laptop open, a stack of papers beside him. I asked what he was doing. He said, reviewing. Reviewing what? Finances. Why? Because one of us has to. He looked up then, and something in his eyes made me pause. It wasn't anger, it was distance, like he'd already left in his head. I crossed my arms. You're acting like you're planning to leave. He said, planning is organization, leaving is decision. I stared at him. And which one are you doing? He didn't answer. For the first time, I felt scared. Not that he'd go, but that he already had, and I just hadn't noticed the moment it happened. That night, I heard a soft click again, the drawer in the study, the one he'd locked before. When I walked past, I saw him slip a USB into his pocket. I said, what are you hiding? He said, evidence doesn't hide. It waits. I laughed because what else was I supposed to do? You sound crazy. He said, maybe, but I'm not the one being laughed at online. I walked away before I said something worse. In bed, I couldn't sleep. The apartment had this new rhythm, his typing, the occasional low beep of his phone, my own heartbeat pounding too fast. I scrolled through old photos of us, vacations, dinners, birthdays. We used to look easy. We used to look like two people on the same side. Around midnight, I opened our shared drive. He'd created new folders, utilities, household, insurance, all dated. Inside one was a subfolder labeled Records. It was password protected. I didn't know what to do, so I shut the laptop, unplugged it, and told myself I'd deal with it tomorrow. The next morning, he made breakfast like nothing had happened. Toast, eggs, coffee. He placed my plate in front of me, said, eat before work. I asked if we could talk. He said, we will, after dinner. All day I kept waiting for some explosion. Instead, it was just this constant quiet edge. I told Clara about it. She said, he's bluffing. Guys like that just want to feel powerful. Post something fun, remind him what he's risking. So I did. That night, I posted an old photo of me and Connor from a charity event months before. We weren't touching, just standing close, smiling. Caption, old friends, good memories. Within 10 minutes, Liam texted, you really don't know when to stop. I typed back, it's just a photo. He replied, it's a statement. When he came home later, he didn't say anything about it. He just walked past me, hung his keys, and went into the study. The printer started again. I went to the door and said, you're not going to scare me into apologizing. He said, I don't need to. You'll do it eventually, for yourself. That infuriated me. Stop talking like you're some therapist. You're not above me. He looked up from his chair, calm. I'm just beside you, Eva. That's the problem. The next day was Saturday. We were supposed to go to his parents' house for dinner. I almost cancelled, but he insisted. He drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift. His phone buzzed once, and I glanced at the screen. A contact with only an emoji flashed, then disappeared. I said, "Who's that?" He said, "A contact." You named them after scales? He said, "Balance is important." I didn't know if he was joking. When we got to his parents' house, Nora greeted us with that careful politeness people use when they already know something. Todd shook my hand, said it was good to see me, but his eyes didn't meet mine. Dinner started quietly. Conversation about work, the weather, nothing real. Then Nora said, "We saw the video." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Todd cleared his throat. "People talk. It's unfortunate." I laughed weakly. It was harmless. A dare. Nora's face stayed neutral. "I'm sure you didn't mean any harm." Liam said nothing. He cut his food slowly, chewed, swallowed. Todd said, "Respect is fragile, Eva. It breaks fast when handled carelessly." That was too much. "Are we really doing this? At dinner? You're all acting like I ran away with someone." Nora said softly, "You ran away from dignity, dear." I set my fork down hard. "Wow, you've rehearsed that one." Liam said quietly, "Enough." I snapped back, "No, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how everyone's turning me into the villain for having a personality." Todd said, "A personality isn't the same as character." Liam stood then. "We're leaving." But Nora said something else before we went. She looked right at me and said, "He's not angry, Eva. He's disappointed." Those words followed me the whole ride home. When we got back, Liam went straight to the guest room again. I sat on the couch staring at the blank TV screen. My phone buzzed with notifications, comments, messages, jokes. I scrolled until my eyes burned. Somewhere in there was a tag from a stranger, a blurry photo of Liam at a coffee shop, sitting across from a man in a suit. Caption, "Looks serious." I stared at it until my heart felt heavy. When he came out later, I asked, "Who are you meeting?" He said, "Someone who listens." "Is it a lawyer?" He didn't answer. I stood up. "You're making a fool of both of us." He said, "Only one of us needed help with that." I wanted to hit him then. Instead, I said, "You'll regret this." He said, "I already did." He walked back into the guest room, and I heard the faint metallic sound of the lock turning again. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Nora's voice, soft but cutting, not angry, disappointed. I wanted to hate her, but part of me wondered if she was right. Still, I told myself I'd fix it. I always did. I'd find a way to make Liam laugh again, make him remember the girl he fell for, the one who knew how to light up a room. But every time I thought about his calm eyes and that locked drawer, the light in my head flickered, just for a second, like maybe it was already going out. The morning after dinner with his parents, I woke up with a pounding headache that had nothing to do with alcohol. It was the silence again, the kind that pressed on your skin until you started making noise just to prove you were alive. The guest room door was closed, of course. The sheets on his side of the bed still untouched. I hated that I noticed those things now. I made coffee, stared at the 2 mugs again. His spotless, mine still with yesterday's ring of milk around the rim. A stupid little difference that somehow felt like the whole marriage in miniature. Him clean, organized, unreadable. Me messy, emotional, always trying to make chaos look charming. I decided I couldn't take it anymore. If he wanted a calm war, fine, but I knew how to fight on my terms, publicly, where I always won. I texted Clara, "Family dinner disaster." His mom basically called me trash. Need brunch, mimosas, validation. She sent back a row of heart emojis and a location pin. At the cafe, the world felt normal again. Music, chatter, sunlight. Clara listened as I poured it all out. The cold house, the videos, the way Liam had turned quiet into punishment. She said, "He's trying to guilt you. Men like him need to feel in control." I nodded, loving how simple she made it sound. She raised an eyebrow. "So, what's your plan?" "My plan," I said, "is to remind him who he's with. Remind him I'm not afraid of being seen." Clara clinked her glass to mine. "That's my girl." We took pictures, laughing like teenagers, and I posted one of us mid-toast with the caption, "Bad Wives Club, meeting adjourned." Within an hour, the likes rolled in. It felt good. Too good. When I got home, Liam was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, phone on speaker, while he cleaned the sink. His voice was calm, professional. "Yes, the joint lease information and receipts. I'll bring copies." He ended the call before I could catch more. "What receipts?" I asked. He turned. "Household ones." I leaned against the counter. "You're not seriously getting lawyers involved, are you?" He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I'm seriously getting clarity involved." I laughed even though I felt my throat tighten. "You sound ridiculous. Nobody's divorcing anyone over a dare." "I didn't say divorce," he said softly. "You did." He left the room and I stood there listening to the sound of the guest room door closing again. That night I called my mother. She said, "Sweetheart, men hate humiliation. He'll forgive you, but you have to act like you did nothing wrong. Confidence fixes everything." So I did. The next weekend, we had a small get-together at my place. Just some of my co-workers and a few of Liam's old friends. He didn't want to host, but I insisted. "We need to show people we're fine," I told him. He said, "We aren't." I smiled anyway and started the guest list. He was polite that night, the perfect host. He poured wine, asked about everyone's work, even complimented my cooking. For a moment, I thought maybe we'd turned a corner. Until someone, of course it was Connor, brought up the party. He laughed, saying, "Man, Eva, that video's still legendary. You should have seen the comment section." Liam's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. I tried to laugh it off. "Oh God, don't remind me," I said. "People act like I committed a crime." Connor grinned. "You kinda did. You killed that game." Everyone laughed except Liam. Later, when most people were gone, he started clearing the table in silence. I followed him into the kitchen. "You could at least pretend you're not miserable," I said. He stacked plates carefully. "I'm not pretending anything anymore." "So what, you're just done trying?" He looked up at me then, eyes sharp but voice calm. "You confuse trying with tolerating." "Wow," I said, crossing my arms. "You've been practicing your lines." He rinsed the last plate, turned off the faucet and said, "You don't even hear yourself anymore, do you?" I wanted to scream that he was twisting everything, but the words stuck. Instead, I said, "You're not perfect either, you know." He nodded. "I know. That's why I document instead of argue." He walked out before I could respond. That night, I noticed a new folder on his laptop screen when I passed by, labeled Archive B. My heart pounded, but I didn't open it. I was scared of what I might find. The next day, Clara called again. "Post something good," she said. "Make him sweat." So I did. A photo of me in my new dress, smiling, the caption, "Still glowing, still growing." It got hundreds of likes. For a few hours, I felt alive again. Then Liam's sister messaged me, "You should stop posting. It's making things worse." I didn't reply. That evening, Liam came home with grocery bags. He placed them on the counter, lined them up neatly, like always. I tried to make small talk. "I bought that new pasta you like," he said. "You don't have to cook for me." I said, "Maybe I want to." He looked at me. "Do you want to, or do you want credit for wanting to?" That made me snap. "You're impossible. No matter what I do, you find some hidden meaning in it. I can't live like this." He nodded, almost kindly. "Then don't." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll handle this properly." That word again, properly. It made my skin crawl. "You keep saying that. What does properly mean, Liam? He wiped his hands on a towel. It means in a way that doesn't end with shouting. He left the kitchen, went straight to the guest room and locked the door. I called my mother again, panicking. He said he's handling it properly. What if he means something legal? She said, he's bluffing. Men like him don't want the shame. Just let him calm down. Stay composed. Composed, I said, pacing. He's collecting evidence like I'm a criminal. Then give him nothing to collect, she said. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying everything. The laughter, the photos, his parents' faces. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that word properly. In the morning, the smell of coffee woke me. He was in the kitchen again, writing something on a sticky note. When I walked in, he placed it on the counter. Rent paid through July. I said, "Why are you writing that down?" He said, "For records." "You think I'm going somewhere?" He looked at me, calm as ever. Eventually, I wanted to throw the mug just to make him react, but I didn't. Instead, I laughed bitterly. "You'll regret this one day." He said, "I already regret staying quiet this long." The next few days passed like we were ghosts haunting the same space. Separate mugs, separate beds, separate everything. I started noticing smaller details, new folders on his laptop, a manila envelope tucked inside his briefcase, his phone always face down. One afternoon, I heard the faint chime of a notification, file uploaded successfully. When he got home that night, he looked lighter, almost peaceful. That scared me more than anger ever could. I asked, "What did you upload?" He smiled slightly. "Backup, just in case." I said, "In case of what?" "In case I need to remember the truth later." I didn't even know what to say. 2 nights later, he came home late, dressed in that grey suit he only wore for big meetings. He smelled faintly of paper and toner. I was waiting for him in the living room, pretending to scroll my phone. He hung his jacket carefully, then sat across from me. "Eva," he said softly, "you should start preparing too." "For what?" He didn't answer. I laughed too loud. "You think you're scaring me, but you're not. You can't just walk away from me like I'm disposable." He said, "No one's walking. I'm documenting the steps." It was like talking to a stranger who looked exactly like him, but didn't love me anymore. I went to the balcony, breathing hard, trying to keep from crying. Below, the city lights blurred together. I thought about all the nights I'd wanted excitement, attention, freedom, and now that I had it, it all felt like noise. When I came back inside, he was sitting at the table, writing something in a notebook. I said, "If you're going to do something, just say it." He looked up, expression unreadable. "I will, when it's official." That word, official, hit like a slap. He closed the notebook, placed it neatly beside his laptop and said, "You don't have to stay up waiting for me anymore." "Why?" "Because I'm not coming back here much longer." I wanted to say don't go. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Instead, I crossed my arms and said, "Do whatever you want. You're not scaring me." He stood, nodded once and said, "I'm not trying to." He walked past me, quiet as ever, leaving the faintest smell of detergent behind him. When the door closed, I finally sat down. My hands were shaking. I told myself he was bluffing, that people don't end things over embarrassment. But the quiet part of me, the one that still heard his mother's voice saying, "He's not angry, he's disappointed," knew he meant every word. I stared at the calendar on the wall. There was a new note scribbled in his careful handwriting. Downtown, 1:30 p.m. Underneath, in smaller letters, just one word: final. The next week blurred together in a way that didn't feel real. I went to work, came home, scrolled through my phone, and pretended nothing was collapsing. Liam had moved most of his things into the guest room. He said it was for space, but it felt like a quiet eviction. His clothes were no longer hanging beside mine. His shoes were gone from the rack by the door. Even his toothbrush disappeared one morning. I stood in the bathroom, staring at the empty spot where it had been, feeling this strange ache that wasn't quite sadness, more like disbelief that something so small could mean something so final. He started leaving earlier and coming home later. He was polite but distant, like we were colleagues instead of partners. I tried to bait him into a reaction, any reaction. Once I asked if he was seeing someone. He didn't even blink. "No," he said, "I'm seeing things clearly." That night, I called Clara again. She told me to make him jealous. "Post a photo that makes you look untouchable," she said. "Remind him what he's losing." So I did. A picture of me in a white dress at the rooftop lounge, hair perfect, captioned, "Still standing tall." It got nearly 1,000 likes. The dopamine hit was instant, comments from strangers calling me beautiful, brave, strong. But when I looked at Liam's profile, it was gone. Deleted. His entire account. For some reason, that shook me more than anything he'd said. When he came home that night, I confronted him. "Why did you delete everything?" He said, "Because some stories don't need an audience." I told him he was being dramatic. He said, "You mistake dignity for drama." I wanted to scream. Instead, I followed him to the kitchen, accusing him of trying to punish me. He rinsed his hands, dried them carefully, and said, "I'm not punishing you, Eva. I'm preparing." That word again, preparing. It sounded colder this time, heavier. "Preparing for what?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment before saying, "To handle this properly." I laughed, sharp and hollow. "You keep saying that like it means something." He nodded once. "It will." Then he walked into the guest room and locked the door again. The next morning, I checked our joint account out of habit. There were withdrawals, small but consistent. Storage rental, document fees, notary services. My chest tightened. I called him at work. He didn't answer. I left a message, trying to sound casual. "Hey, just saw some weird charges. Call me back." He didn't call. That evening, I asked him about it directly. "Are you moving out?" He didn't deny it. "I'm moving forward," he said. "Without me?" He looked down at his coffee mug. "You've been moving without me for months." I said, "This is insane. You're throwing everything away over a joke." He said, "You threw it first." That shut me up for a moment. I wanted to explain it again, tell him it wasn't what it looked like, but we'd said all those things already. He didn't want explanations anymore. He wanted order. Later that night, I heard him on the phone again. His voice was steady, low. "Yes, the forms are ready. I'll bring them tomorrow." I pressed my ear against the wall, holding my breath. The person on the other end said something I couldn't make out. Liam replied, "Yes, I want it served directly." I backed away from the wall like I'd been burned. Served. That word sounded official, dangerous. I called my mother right away. She said, "He's bluffing. He's trying to scare you." What if he's not? Then he's making a fool of himself. Nobody wins from washing their laundry in public. Stay calm. Don't give him a reason to act superior. "Mom, he doesn't need a reason. He's already decided I'm guilty." She sighed. "Then stop acting like you are." I hated how she said that, like it was that easy. The next day, Liam came home early. He asked me to sit down. I did, reluctantly, because something in his tone told me this wasn't another cold silence. He looked tired but composed, the kind of calm that comes after someone finishes deciding. "I've been patient," he said. "Maybe too patient, but I'm not going to argue with you anymore. I'm not going to let other people define what happened. I'm going to handle it through the proper channels." I tried to interrupt, but he raised a hand. "I'm not saying this out of anger. I'm saying it because you need to understand what's next. There are procedures. I've spoken to the right people." "The right people? You mean lawyers?" He didn't answer directly. "You'll be notified soon." I laughed out of shock. "You're making this sound like a court case. We're not criminals." He nodded slowly. "One of us isn't." My voice shook. "You can't seriously be doing this." He said, "I am. I should have done it sooner." He stood up and I followed him to the door, shouting that he was insane, that he'd regret it. He turned once, looking at me with the same expression from that night on the rooftop. Sad, quiet, distant. "You always think consequences are cruelty," he said. "They're just consequences." Then he left. That night I couldn't stop pacing. I checked our accounts again. He'd moved most of the savings into a new one. I saw a note in the transaction history. Separation account, record only. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped my phone. Clara told me to come over, said we'd talk it out. I spent the night at her place, drinking wine and ranting. She said, "If he wants to play the victim, let him. Everyone saw how uptight he is. Nobody's on his side." I wanted to believe that. I even posted another photo, this time an old one of us at a wedding, me laughing, him looking serious. Caption: "Some people just can't take a joke." It didn't go the way I expected. The comments were different now. People weren't laughing anymore. A few said things like, "This isn't funny anymore." One woman wrote, "He's protecting his peace." Let him. I deleted the post after an hour, but I knew he'd already seen it. When I came home the next morning, the apartment looked emptier. Half the shelves were bare. His framed certificates were gone, his jackets, his shoes. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted, "Are you moving out?" He replied with one line, "I told you, I'm handling it properly." I sank to the floor, phone in my hand, staring at that sentence until my eyes blurred. By evening, he returned briefly to pick up more things. I tried to act composed. "So that's it," I said. "You're just leaving?" He said, "Not yet. There's a process." "What process?" "You'll find out soon." I blocked the doorway. "You don't get to make me the villain." He looked me in the eye. "Eva, you made yourself the headline. I'm just closing the article." I didn't even know what that meant. After he left, I wandered through the apartment, touching everything he'd moved. Empty hangers, clean counters, the faint smell of his cologne in the hall. On the table was a folder labeled Household. Inside were receipts, notes, and a single sheet of paper with my name typed at the top. It wasn't anything official, just a list. May 12th, party video posted. May 18th, HR notice. May 22, public comments. At the bottom, one final line, prepared submission, pending signature. I tore it up and threw it in the trash, even though I knew he probably had copies. That night, my mother called again. "You need to talk to him before it's too late," she said. "Apologize, cry if you have to." "I'm not begging," I said. She sighed. "Then you're choosing pride over peace." Maybe I was, but pride was the only thing I had left that felt like mine. I waited for him to come home, but he didn't. Around midnight, I heard the ping of my phone. A new message from an unknown number. It was a photo of our apartment door. Under it, one line. "I'll pick up the rest this weekend." No name, but I knew it was him. I lay awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling. I thought about the rooftop, about the sound of people laughing, about how confident I'd felt being the center of attention. Now, every echo of that laughter felt like mockery. By morning, I decided to call him one last time. When he answered, his tone was measured, formal. "Yes? Can we talk?" "We already did." "Please, Liam." He was silent for a moment, then said, "You'll have everything in writing soon. That's the only kind of talk that matters now." "You're really doing this?" "I'm doing it properly." He hung up. I dropped the phone, walked to the balcony, and looked down at the street. People were walking, laughing, carrying coffee cups. The world kept moving. Mine didn't. For the rest of the day, I tried to act normal, cleaned, cooked, even went for a run. But the quiet followed me everywhere. That evening, when I opened my laptop, a notification popped up from our shared drive, file removed by user. I clicked it instinctively. Every folder he'd made, Archive A, Archive B, Household, was gone, replaced by a single new one labeled Final Documents. It was empty. For now. When he came by 2 nights later, he was calm again. He gathered the last of his things, folded his jacket neatly, and paused by the door. "This is the last time I'll come in without permission," he said. I tried to smile, tried to sound strong. "So what? You're just giving up?" He shook his head. "No, I'm doing what you never did, taking responsibility." He turned to leave, and I said, "You're cruel." He stopped, but didn't look back. "No," he said quietly. "I'm careful." And then he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. The silence felt heavier than ever, but under it was something else, a kind of ticking, like the sound of a countdown I couldn't see. I didn't know when it would reach 0, only that it was coming. Still, I told myself I could fix it. I always could. He'd cool off, the lawyers would talk him down, and everything would settle. He loved me once. He couldn't just erase that, but deep down, I knew he'd already done what he promised. He was handling it properly, and whatever properly meant, I was about to find out. It had been 3 weeks since Liam moved out. The apartment felt too large now, too neat, like a hotel room after checkout. His smell was gone, his shoes were gone, even the faint hum of his printer was gone. What was left was me, and the echo of all the things I'd laughed at that he'd taken seriously. I kept expecting a message, or a knock, or some sign that he wanted to fix things. Instead, nothing. Not even silence this time, just absence. I told myself he was cooling off. I told myself he missed me. I even convinced myself he was testing me, and if I just stayed calm, he'd come back. But the quiet started to rot. People stopped calling. Even Clara had moved on to some new drama. When I texted her, she replied with, "Still love you, but I'm staying out of it." My mother said I should give it time, that men who leave often come crawling back once they realize no one else will put up with them. I wanted to believe her. I kept replaying our last conversation. The way he'd said, "I'll handle it properly." The way he'd closed the door, like it was sealing something more than air between us. Then, one Wednesday morning, it happened. I was at work, half distracted, scrolling through emails I wasn't really reading, when the receptionist called over the intercom. Her voice had that careful tone people use when they already know something's about to be bad. "Eva, there's someone here asking for you. Says it's personal." I frowned. "Who?" "Didn't say. He's in the lobby. Has paperwork." Paperwork. The word hit me like ice. When I got to the lobby, he was standing there, Liam. In a charcoal suit, pressed shirt, no tie, calm as ever. There was a man beside him, older, holding a thick envelope. For a moment, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. I even smiled, waiting for him to say something sarcastic, something normal. But he didn't. He just looked at me with that same quiet stare that had once been love. "Eva Keene?" the man beside him asked. "Yes?" He handed me the envelope. "You've been formally served." I blinked, staring at the papers like they were written in another language. "Served? What is this?" Liam didn't answer. The man said, "Notice of termination of cohabitation agreement, itemized financial reconciliation, and," he paused, "civil defamation complaint." I actually laughed, a choked, desperate sound. "You're suing me? For what?" Liam finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, cutting through everything. "For the lies you told to protect your image, for the things you posted, for turning my life into your entertainment." "This is insane," I said. "You can't sue your fiancé." He said, "You stopped being my fiancé when you started performing as one." People were watching now. Co-workers, clients, strangers. Phones lifted. Someone whispered my name. I felt the ground tilt under me. "Liam, please, can we talk about this somewhere else?" He shook his head. "You wanted an audience. You always did." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You're humiliating yourself." He didn't flinch. No, Eva, I'm reclaiming what you humiliated. The man beside him cleared his throat. You'll need to sign the receipt confirming delivery. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I signed anyway, the sound of the pen scratching paper echoing in the marble lobby. When I looked up, Liam was already putting distance between us. You can call the number listed, he said. They'll explain everything. I won't. Liam, please, I said. We can fix this. You can't just... He stopped, looked back once. You've said that before. The fixing always starts after the breaking. I'm finished fixing. The words hung in the air like smoke. He turned and walked out of the building, sunlight catching on the glass doors as they closed behind him. For a second, I stood there frozen. The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the phones had stopped ringing. Then the whispers started again, quiet and sharp. Someone said, "That's her." Another voice, "Guess it wasn't just a rumor." I looked down at the envelope, my name printed neatly across the front in black ink. Inside were copies of everything, screenshots of my posts, time-stamped messages, bank records showing joint funds used for events he hadn't approved. Every little thing I'd thought was harmless, every petty move I'd made to stay in control. At the back was a single page, bold at the top, "Request for reconciliation denied." My vision blurred. I left work without a word. My hands wouldn't stop shaking the entire drive home. The moment I stepped into the apartment, I tore the envelope open again, as if rereading it would make it make sense. The papers didn't scream. They didn't accuse. They just existed. Cold, factual, impossible to argue with. In the middle of the pile was a photo, a printout from that night on the rooftop. Me laughing, Connor grinning, Liam in the background, looking directly at the camera. Underneath it, in small typed letters, "Public incident, verified witnesses." I dropped it. The paper fluttered to the floor, landing face up. His eyes stared at me even from the photo, calm, unblinking, the same look he'd given me in the lobby. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. "What did you do?" He called. He said it's official. I didn't reply. Then another notification, a tag on social media. Someone had posted a picture of the lobby scene. The caption read, "Remember the rooftop bride? Karma finally RSVP'd." I deleted the app right then, but the damage was done. By evening, I couldn't breathe in that apartment anymore. Every drawer, every empty space screamed his name. The mug he always used sat on the counter, spotless. I picked it up, stared at my reflection in its clean curve, then threw it in the sink. It didn't break. It just clanged, mocking me. The doorbell rang. For a second, I thought he'd come back. I opened it too fast. It wasn't him. It was a courier, holding another envelope. "For Miss Keene," he said, "additional documents." I signed again, my signature barely legible. When I opened it, it was a copy of the court filing, stamped and dated. Civil complaint, defamation and invasion of privacy. Attached was a temporary financial order, dividing expenses and freezing our joint accounts. He'd really done it. I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the room. Outside, the city went on as if nothing had happened. At some point, my phone buzzed again, this time from a private number. It was a text, just 3 words. "It's all official. No name, no punctuation, just finality." I stared at it for a long time before realizing my hands were trembling too hard to type. I wanted to respond, to say something clever, something cutting, something that would make him remember the woman he used to love. But all I could think about was that first night on the rooftop, the laughter, the cheers, the way he'd looked at me just before walking out. I thought I'd won back then. I thought silence meant surrender. Now I knew better. Around midnight, I walked onto the balcony. The air was cold, heavy. The city lights blurred below, glittering and distant. Somewhere out there, Liam was probably asleep, calm, maybe even free. I went back inside and gathered the papers into a neat pile. For once, I folded something carefully. I placed them in the center of the table and sat down. The clock ticked, steady and merciless. Every little sound felt like an ending. When dawn came, the first light touched the corner of the envelope. My name gleamed faintly in the reflection. I wanted to tear it all up, to erase every proof he'd made, but I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down, I finally understood what he'd been saying all along. He wasn't punishing me, he was just finishing. The doorbell rang again, another delivery, another copy maybe, or confirmation. I didn't move to answer. I just sat there, staring at the papers that had turned me from someone's future into someone's example. Outside, the city was already awake. I heard a voice in the hallway, a neighbor greeting the courier, the soft shuffle of papers changing hands. Then the sound of footsteps fading away. I closed my eyes and listened. For the first time since all of it began, there was no laughter, no noise, no audience. Just silence. Real silence. And for the first time, I didn't try to fill it.